Welcome along. Today we're doing a bit of a digest, pulling out the key insights from a really interesting recent interview with Mark Zuckerberg.
That's right. It was on the Dwarkesh Patel YouTube channel titled Mark Zuckerberg Meta's AGI Plan. We're basically going to sift through it for the main takeaways on Meta's AI strategy and, well, his view on AI generally.
Exactly. Not just the headlines, but digging into what he actually said. And one thing that jumps out right away is how fast he thinks things are moving.
Oh, definitely. He started by saying something like, the whole field is so dynamic, I feel like a ton has changed since the last time we talked. Which, I mean, really sets the scene, doesn't it?
It really does. So, okay,
Yeah.
first big point, Meta AI's usage. He threw out a pretty staggering number.
Yeah, he said almost 1 billion people using it monthly now. 1 billion monthly.
That's huge. And you can see how that scale gives them this massive advantage, right? For data, for feedback.
Absolutely. And it leads into what they're planning next, which sounds quite exciting, this personalization loop.
Ah, right. Leveraging all that data.
Exactly. Your profile info, who you know, the social graph, plus how you actually interact with the AI itself. He seemed genuinely enthusiastic about building that out.
Makes sense. A more tailored AI experience. Okay, so shifting gears to the models themselves. Llama 4.
Yep, the Llama 4 family. He mentioned they announced 4 models are coming.
4. And the first couple are already out.
Sort of, yeah. Released initially were Scout and Maverick. He described them as mid-sized to smaller models.
Okay. And what's special about them?
Well, the focus seems to be on efficiency, multimodality, so handling text, images, that kind of thing, and crucially, low latency, speed.
Right. Designed for their own products, I guess.
Primarily, yeah, internal use cases. But importantly, they're still open sourcing them.
Good to know. And there's more coming.
He mentioned Little Llama is on the way in the next few months. That's an 8 billion parameter one, so similar in size to the Llama 3 version that was really popular.
Okay, so Scout, Maverick, Little Llama, and then there's the big one.
Behemoth, yes. That's the one he called their first frontier model.
Frontier model, meaning...
Basically the absolute cutting edge, over 2 trillion parameters. It's designed to push the boundaries of what AI can do.
2 trillion. Wow. That must bring some challenges, just running something that big.
Huge challenges. He specifically mentioned the infrastructure hurdles, especially after the main training is done, the post-training part. They're still figuring out, the best way to actually use something that powerful.
How? Like, what are they thinking?
One possibility he mentioned is distillation, kind of like teaching a smaller, more efficient model all the tricks the giant and behemoth model learned.
Interesting. Okay, so that brings us to this whole open source versus closed source thing. Lots of people feel like the closed models, maybe from OpenAI or Anthropic are pulling ahead. What was his take?
Well, he pushed back on that a bit. He actually said it's been a very good year for open source overall. He seemed pleased that Llama isn't the only big player innovating in open source anymore.
So more competition is good for open source.
Seems to be his view. He also talked about specialization, how some models are getting really good at specific things like reasoning for math or coding. Apparently, they achieve that by just using more compute time when generating an answer.
Right, they think for longer.
Exactly. And he did say Meta is building a Llama 4 reasoning model too, but
But their main focus for the AI we actually use in apps is different.
that's the impression I got. He emphasized latency and good intelligence per cost for their consumer products. So quick, useful answers are maybe the priority over absolute top-tier reasoning if it takes too long or costs too much.
Okay, that makes sense for things like chatbots and WhatsApp.
Yeah.
What about evaluating these models benchmarking? He seemed a bit skeptical of the public ones.
Yeah, things like Chatbot Arena. His point was they might not really reflect how people use AI in actual products day to day, and also that they can be, quote, gameable.
Gameable, meaning labs can optimize just for the test.
Kind of, yeah. So Meta's main benchmark, he said, is just user value. How useful is it inside their products? Which, obviously, you can't directly compare model to model easily.
But he sees value in the open source community testing things out.
Oh, definitely. He acknowledged that the community is great for finding strengths and weaknesses that maybe their internal testing doesn't catch.
Okay, looking bigger picture now. Artificial General Intelligence, AGI. That's the long-term goal for many labs, isn't it?
It certainly seems to be a shared ambition, yeah. Creating general intelligence or even superintelligence. He framed it as empowering people and boosting the economy.
Did he talk about how different labs are approaching it?
Briefly. He mentioned like an Anthropic focusing maybe more on coding and agents, OpenAI on reasoning. His emphasis, Meta's emphasis, seemed to be on AI that's quick, natural feeling, multimodal, and just integrates really smoothly into life.
Right. Which connects to this idea of an intelligence explosion. The theory that AI could start improving itself really fast, maybe automating its own research.
Yeah. He acknowledged that idea, yeah. Called it compelling. He even mentioned their internal coding agent, MetaMate, which is specifically designed to help speed up Llama research.
Did he give a timeline for that?
He actually predicted AI would be writing most of the code for efforts like MetaMate within 12 to 18 months.
Most of the code. Wow.
Yeah. But he also cautioned that it's probably not the only path forward. He thinks the AI space is huge and will likely see lots of specialization, not just one single runaway AI.
That's interesting, because if superintelligence is the ultimate goal, why spend so much effort right now on, say, personal assistants in WhatsApp or Instagram?
Good question. He basically disagrees with the fast takeoff scenario for superintelligence. He thinks people underestimate the time needed for the physical stuff.
Physical stuff like,
Compute power, building data centers, networking, getting enough energy, all the real-world infrastructure. He thinks that will be a bottleneck.
so it's not just about writing code faster.
Not just that, he also stressed the importance of, like, coevolution, us learning how to use AI effectively, and the AI learning about us, our preferences, accumulating context over time. That takes interaction. It takes time.
He gave an example, didn't he?
Yeah, about their ads team. Even now, with human engineers, they hit limits on how many hypotheses they can test simply because of compute constraints. So bottlenecks exist even without super fast AI code generation.
Right. Okay, let's talk about Meta's distribution, that huge user base we mentioned earlier. How does he see that playing into their AI strategy?
Well, he highlighted the massive usage already happening in WhatsApp, especially outside the US, perhaps. He thinks US usage might even be underestimated.
And the standalone Meta AI app, is that mainly for the US?
That seemed to be the implication, a more direct way to reach that market.
But does having users message friends necessarily help train an AI to be amazing at, say, coding or scientific research? Some people are skeptical about that connection.
He addressed that. His view is that there won't be just one type of AI application. There'll be AI for knowledge work, AI for search, AI for entertainment. It's not all going to be coding.
An AI in our feeds.
Yeah, he sees a shift there, too.
Hmm.
More interactive, AI-driven content, moving beyond just video recommendations to something more dynamic.
Okay, another really interesting thread was about, well, human relationships with AI.
Yeah, that was quite thought-provoking. He talked about how people are already forming meaningful connections, with AI therapists or AI friends, and he expects that to intensify.
It sounds a bit sci-fi, but maybe it meets a need.
Possibly. He cited a statistic, I think, about the average American having fewer than 3 close friends, so maybe there's a gap AI could potentially help fill.
How is Meta AI being used like that now?
He mentioned one current use case is helping people draft difficult messages or navigate tricky conversations. And looking ahead, he pointed to their Reality Labs work on codec avatars.
Ah, the super realistic virtual representations.
Exactly. For more embodied, natural AI interaction down the line.
Right. Let's switch to the open source license for Llama. Meta really pioneered open sourcing these big models. What's their thinking behind the specific license they use? Some find it a bit restrictive.
He argued it's not really onerous. The main point, he explained, is it requires very large companies, specifically cloud providers, to come talk to Meta before they start selling services based on Llama.
So it's about having a conversation with potential major commercial users.
Basically, yeah, engaging with them. He did say they'd reevaluate if the license genuinely became a blocker for adoption, but so far they haven't seen that happening in practice.
Okay. He also made a strong point about the importance of specifically American AI models. What was the reasoning there?
His argument is that AI models inherently absorb and reflect the values and sort of ways of thinking of their creators and the data they're trained on.
He had an anecdote about that.
Yeah. Yeah. About an early Llama version sounding like an American-speaking French. It encodes culture. He also raised security points, concerns about relying on models potentially tied to other governments, especially if they're generating code that could have vulnerabilities.
That relates back to distillation too, doesn't it? Making models smaller.
It does. Distillation lets you create smaller, more efficient models for specific tasks. And you can potentially distill knowledge from multiple open source models, not just one.
But security is still a concern there.
Absolutely. Distilling language models safely is tricky. He mentioned Meta is researching safe distillation and also building open source safety tools like Llama Guard and Code Shield to help manage risks.
Makes sense. Okay, the big question, monetization.
hmm
How does Meta plan to make money from all this AI investment? It's not all going to be ads, is it?
He acknowledged that, yeah, ads will still be key for supporting free services like they are now across Meta's platforms, but he definitely anticipates other models emerging.
Like what?
Premium services, maybe, paying for access to more powerful models or higher compute usage. And specialized AI tools for businesses or specific tasks could also be subscription-based or licensed.
Mhm.
Kind of like the mix you see on the internet today, free ad-supported stuff alongside paid software and services.
Right, a mixed economy. Just quickly, overseeing all these different AI projects must be a huge challenge. How does he manage that?
He touched on it briefly. Lots of focus on attracting top talent, making sure different teams collaborate effectively, and him making the big calls on infrastructure investments and overall strategy. He also noted how research-driven it is. The model capabilities often dictate what products they can even build.
And engaging with government. He seems quite open about talking to Washington.
Yeah, he framed it as just being a responsible American company. Engaging with the U.S. government, regardless of who's in power, is part of that responsibility from his perspective.
Does that relate to lessons learned from content moderation debates?
It seems like it. He mentioned learning the importance of the company ultimately owning its decisions on things like governance, rather than being overly swayed by external pressures from government or media.
Okay, final major topic, the impact of all this. If AI dramatically increases software productivity, what does that mean for society, for jobs?
He sees it potentially continuing a long-term trend. As basic productivity goes up, people tend to focus more on creative work, culture, entertainment, and also tackling bigger, more complex global problems that become feasible.
So not necessarily mass unemployment in software.
Not in his view. He gave the example of customer support. AI might handle 90% of the simple queries, but that could make providing high-quality human support for complex issues economically viable where it wasn't before. His quote was something like, "Usually you create things that take away 90% of the work, and that leads you to want more people, not less."
Interesting perspective. So AI making things cheaper might actually increase demand overall.
That's the argument, yeah. Expanding the possibilities rather than just replacing humans.
Well, that covers a lot of ground. A really fascinating summary of where Meta and Zuckerberg see AI heading.
Definitely. We've touched on Meta AI's growth, the new Llama 4 models, including Behemoth, the open versus closed debate, the path towards AGI, those infrastructure bottlenecks, potential monetization, and even the societal shifts. Lots for you to think about.
Absolutely. It's clear things are moving incredibly fast, and the implications are, well, pretty huge.
Couldn't agree more.
So if you found this digest useful and want to keep up with summaries like this on major tech developments, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on future ones.